Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you handed them real power over your life, and then watched them use that exact power against you the moment you looked weak? Now imagine that person isn't your business partner or your best friend. Imagine it's your most trusted general, and you're an emperor who's supposedly on his deathbed. Here's the strange part, someone actually warned Marcus Aurelius this would happen, years before it did. He heard the warning. And he chose to trust the man anyway. What happened next is one of the most remarkable stories in Roman history, not because of the betrayal, but because of what the emperor did after. You've probably never been betrayed on the scale of an empire. But you know this feeling, a close friend, a business partner, someone in your own family, turning on you at the exact moment you couldn't fight back. And maybe, if you're honest, there were warning signs you chose to ignore, because you wanted to believe the best in them. That specific kind of pain, the pain of realizing you saw it coming and trusted them anyway, is what this story is really about. Over the next half hour, I'm going to walk you through the full story, not the shortened version you'll find in a 2-minute clip, but the real one, with the ignored warning, the false rumor that triggered it all, the messy and disputed aftermath that historians still argue about today, and the personal tragedy that hit Marcus Aurelius at the exact same time. By the end, you'll understand something about betrayal, forgiveness, and self-control that most people never learn until they've been burned themselves. To understand this story, you need to understand who Marcus Aurelius actually was before any of this happened. He wasn't born to be emperor. He was born Marcus Annius Verus, a Roman noble with a serious, studious temperament, and from a young age he was drawn to Stoic philosophy, the idea that you can't control the world around you, only your own judgments and reactions to it. He lived simply, studied constantly, and by most accounts would have been content as a philosopher rather than a ruler. But fate had other plans. He was adopted by the Emperor Antoninus Pius and groomed for power, and in 161 AD he became emperor, doing something no Roman had done before, splitting the throne to rule jointly with his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus. His reign should have been the golden, peaceful continuation of what historians call the era of the 5 good emperors. Instead, it became one of the most brutal stretches any Roman ruler had faced. A devastating war broke out with the Parthian Empire in the east. Then, as Roman soldiers returned from that war, they brought something back with them that would kill far more people than any battle, a plague, what we now call the Antonine Plague, that swept through the empire and killed millions. On top of that, Germanic tribes began pushing across the Danube frontier in the north, forcing Marcus to spend years of his life not in Rome, but in military camps, personally commanding troops in a war he never wanted. This is the man we're talking about, not a comfortable ruler on a throne, but someone almost constantly at war, grieving, exhausted, and, for much of this story, seriously ill. Now, into this chaos, one man kept proving himself extraordinary, Avidius Cassius. Cassius came from a notable Syrian family and rose through the ranks with real talent. During the Parthian War, he achieved what few Roman generals ever had. He pushed deep into enemy territory, defeated Parthian forces at Duryuropos, and captured the Parthian capital itself, Ctesiphon. He was disciplined, strict, and utterly effective. A few years later, when a serious revolt broke out in Egypt, the so-called Bucoli uprising, it was Cassius who was sent in, and Cassius who crushed it. By 172 AD, Marcus trusted him with something almost unheard of, command over the entire eastern portion of the Roman Empire. Syria, Egypt, Arabia, all of it, under one man. It's hard to overstate what that meant. This wasn't just a general anymore. This was, in practice, a second emperor for half the known world. And here's the detail almost nobody includes when they tell this story, the part that makes it genuinely tragic instead of just shocking. There is a surviving letter, believed to be from Lucius Verus, Marcus's co-emperor, warning him directly about Cassius. In it, Verus writes that Cassius dislikes our whole regime, that he ridicules our letters, and, most damning of all, that Cassius had reportedly called Marcus a philosophizing old woman behind his back. Verus warned that Cassius was, in his own words, avid for empire, hungry for it, and that keeping such a popular, capable commander armed and ready was a risk to Marcus's own children. Marcus's reported response is the part that should give you chills. He wrote back, essentially, that if the empire truly was destined for Cassius, killing him wouldn't stop it. And then this line, real, documented, extraordinary for a ruler to say about a man being described as a threat to his own children. He said that if it came down to choosing whether Cassius should live or his children should be safe from that risk, he would rather his own children perish than see a good man destroyed out of paranoia. He ended the letter by saying, "Let Cassius go his own way." Think about what you just heard. Marcus wasn't naive. He wasn't blindsided by some stranger. He was warned, directly, by name, with specific evidence, and he chose trust over suspicion anyway, because acting on paranoia went against everything he believed about how a just ruler should behave. Was that a mistake? We're about to find out. But I want you to sit with this for a second, because most versions of this story skip straight to the betrayal, as if Marcus were simply blindsided. He wasn't. He made a conscious, philosophical choice to trust a man everyone told him not to trust, and that choice is arguably more interesting than the betrayal itself. 3 years later, in 175 AD, everything Verus warned about came true. By this point, Lucius Verus had already died of illness, leaving Marcus as sole emperor. Marcus was deep into the Danube campaign, fighting Germanic tribes, and, by most accounts, seriously unwell, possibly close to death. A rumor began spreading through the eastern provinces: the emperor is dead. Whatever the true origin of the rumor, Cassius didn't wait to confirm it. He declared himself emperor. The legions in Egypt hailed him. Within weeks, Syria, Egypt, and Arabia, the entire eastern half of the empire Marcus had personally handed him, were now under Cassius's control. Picture the moment Marcus received this news. He's sick. He's far from home. He's already spent years fighting a war he never chose. And now, the one man he was explicitly warned about, the one man he chose to trust anyway, on principle, has taken the exact power Marcus gave him and turned it into a weapon. This is the part of the story that should feel personal to you, whatever your version of this looks like. Maybe it wasn't an empire. Maybe it was a business you built together, a secret you shared, a position you fought to get someone. The specific shape of the betrayal changes. The feeling, of being exploited at your most vulnerable moment by the person you trusted most, doesn't. According to the historian Cassius Dio, Marcus initially kept the news quiet, but as rumors spread through the camp, he gathered his soldiers and addressed them directly. A version of that speech has survived, and while historians debate exactly how much of it is verbatim, they largely agree the tone and substance are authentically his. In it, he doesn't rage. He doesn't call for slaughter. He says, and I'm paraphrasing the sentiment closely here, that it grieves him more than the danger itself that faith between men could be broken so completely, that he had been plotted against by someone he held dearest. He tells his soldiers he would have gladly resolved this through debate rather than war, if Cassius had been willing to meet him. Here's where the story breaks from everything you'd expect of a Roman emperor facing a coup. Other emperors answered threats like this with blood, immediately and publicly. Nero had his own mother killed over a suspected plot. Otho had a rival assassinated and paraded his severed head through Rome as a warning to anyone else who might get ideas. Marcus mobilized his army to march east, but gave no preemptive order for mass executions. No immediate purge of Cassius's family. No terror campaign to make an example of the eastern provinces that had supported the revolt. He moved with purpose, but without the vengeful cruelty that was almost the default setting for a threatened Roman ruler. But Marcus never actually got the confrontation he seemed to be preparing for. The revolt lasted only about 3 months. Once it became undeniable that Marcus was alive and marching south with overwhelming force, support for Cassius collapsed almost overnight. In July of 175 AD, one of Cassius's own centurions, a man who had served under him, assassinated him. His head was cut off and sent to Marcus as a trophy, the kind of gift a Roman soldier might expect would please an angry emperor. It didn't please him. Not even close. According to Cassius Dio, when Cassius's severed head arrived, Marcus refused to look at it. He ordered it buried properly instead of displayed. And by most accounts, he expressed real regret, not satisfaction, because the assassination had robbed him of something he apparently wanted, the chance to face Cassius directly and offer him mercy himself. Sit with that for a second. This wasn't a man performing forgiveness for an audience. The person he might have forgiven was already dead. There was no political benefit left to gain from mercy at that point, and he still wanted it. This next part isn't speculation or legend, it's one of the only pieces of this entire story we have almost direct evidence for. A letter attributed to Marcus, addressed to the Senate, survives in fragments. In it, he pleads, not orders, pleads, with the Senate to show mercy. He asks that no senator be executed, that no noble blood be spilled, that exiles be allowed to return home and their property be restored. He specifically names Cassius's children, his son-in-law, and his wife, and asks that they be spared any harsher punishment. One line attributed to him captures the whole philosophy behind everything he's doing here, that revenge, even when fully deserved, never sits well on a ruler. The more deserved it looks to everyone else, the worse it actually makes the person who takes it. Now, and I think this is genuinely important, because it's the difference between telling you a clean inspirational story and telling you what actually happened, historians don't fully agree on what happened next. Cassius Dio, one of our two major sources, reports something much darker than a clean, forgiving ending. He says Cassius's wife and children were killed anyway, by local Syrians and soldiers acting on their own, defying what Marcus had explicitly asked for. A different, much later source, the Historia Augusta, which modern historians consider far less reliable, claims the opposite, that the family was spared and even had half their inheritance restored to them. We genuinely don't know for certain which is true. What we do know is that Marcus's intentions, documented in his own surviving letter, were clearly for mercy, but intentions and outcomes aren't always the same thing, even for an emperor. Sometimes forgiveness is what you choose. Whether the world lets that forgiveness actually land the way you meant it to is not always up to you. And here's something that rarely makes it into the shortened versions of this story. While all of this was happening, Marcus wasn't just dealing with political betrayal. He was also grieving. His wife, Faustina, had traveled east with him during this entire crisis. Shortly after the revolt collapsed, she died suddenly. Some later writers tried to paint her as unfaithful or scandalous, but those claims are directly contradicted by Marcus's own writings about her, which are affectionate and grief-stricken. He lost his most trusted general to betrayal and his wife to death within the same stretch of months, while still commanding an empire at war on two fronts. I'm telling you this not to pile on tragedy for its own sake, but because it changes how you should read everything that came before. His restraint, his mercy, his refusal to seek revenge, none of that happened in some calm, controlled environment. It happened while he was falling apart on multiple fronts at once. That's what makes it remarkable. Self-control isn't tested when life is easy. It's tested exactly when it's this hard. But I want to be honest with you, because turning Marcus Aurelius into an untouchable saint would actually undercut the lesson here. 2 years after the revolt, Marcus made a decision that broke a long Roman tradition. For generations, the good emperors had chosen their most capable successor through adoption, rather than automatically handing power to a blood relative. Marcus broke that pattern. He made his own son, Commodus, only 15 years old at the time, co-emperor. Historians widely connect this decision to the trauma of the Cassius revolt. Having watched how quickly a trusted outsider could seize power the moment his authority looked uncertain, Marcus moved to secure succession within his own bloodline instead. It's a very human, very understandable reaction to betrayal, and it's also, by most historical assessments, one of the worst decisions of his reign, since Commodus went on to become one of Rome's most infamous and destructive rulers. So let's bring this back to your life, because this story isn't just ancient history, the emotional pattern repeats everywhere. In friendship, you probably know the feeling of a close friend disappearing, or worse, siding against you, right when you needed them most. The instinct is to cut them off completely, tell everyone your version of events, make sure they pay socially for what they did. Marcus's approach suggests a different option: protect yourself fully, without needing to destroy them to feel secure again. In business, a partner, co-founder, or colleague using inside knowledge you gave them in good faith, against you. This is closer to the Cassius story than almost anything else in modern life, someone you elevated, who then used that elevation against you. Notice that Marcus still took action here. He didn't just stay calm and do nothing, he mobilized. Boundaries and consequences are not the opposite of self-control. Refusing to let rage choose your actions is. In family, betrayal here cuts deepest because there's often no clean way to walk away. Marcus's mercy toward Cassius's own wife and children, people who did nothing wrong themselves, is worth sitting with if you've ever been tempted to make an entire family pay for one person's actions. On social media, when someone spreads a false story about you, the modern instinct is to respond immediately, publicly, and with maximum intensity. Marcus's instinct, asking the Senate to hold back, refusing to even look at supposed proof of victory sent to him, suggests a much harder, much rarer alternative: restraint, even when the crowd is ready to celebrate revenge with you. So here's what I actually want you to take from this, not a Instagram caption version of "always forgive," because that's not what happened here, and it's not good advice. The real lesson is this: you can protect yourself completely, and still refuse to let rage decide who you become. Marcus didn't ignore the threat. He marched an army toward it. He didn't pretend the betrayal didn't hurt, his own words show real grief. But at every single decision point, the initial warning he received years earlier, the speech to his troops, the treatment of the severed head, the letter to the Senate, he chose the response that protected his integrity, not just his power. The deepest betrayals don't hurt because the person was powerful. They hurt because they came from someone you trusted completely, someone you may have even been warned about and chose to trust anyway. But how you respond to that pain, that, and only that, is what's actually still in your control. Think about the person who betrayed you, big or small, recent or years ago. Did you carry that anger for months, maybe years, letting it quietly shape every new relationship after it? Or could you, like a sick, grieving emperor on a battlefield far from home, find a way to hold both things at once: real protection for yourself, and a refusal to let someone else's betrayal write the next chapter of who you are? That's not weakness. History remembers Marcus Aurelius as one of the most respected rulers who ever lived, not despite this moment, but partly because of it. Let's run through it fast. 1. Marcus was warned, years in advance, that Cassius couldn't be trusted, and chose principle over paranoia anyway. 2. When the betrayal came, he mobilized to defend himself, but ordered no preemptive slaughter. 3. He refused to celebrate Cassius's death, and begged the Senate for mercy toward his family, even though history isn't fully sure that mercy was honored. 4. The trauma still changed him, pushing him toward a decision, making Commodus co-emperor, that history would judge harshly. Even a stoic emperor wasn't immune to fear. He just refused to let it turn into cruelty. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you were actually warned about, someone you trusted anyway, on principle, comment "I knew" below. I want to see how many of us have lived through exactly that specific kind of pain. And if this story changed how you think about self-control under pressure, hit subscribe now, because next week, I'm covering the one moment in Marcus Aurelius's life where even his own Stoic philosophy nearly broke him completely.